passage of Scripture.
The Old Testament book of Psalms. We're going to talk about perspective, perception, point of view, on how we see things. And all of those are a part of our life, your life, our lives. Because the reality of life is this. To quote the old adage, the old saying, perception does become reality. The way you see things is the way they are, at least in your world. What we see, friends, determines what we do. What we see determines how we live. Take, for instance, an 8-ounce glass. I've said this before. You got an 8-ounce glass sparkling and shiny out of the dishwasher or the sink. And into that 8-ounce size glass, you pour 4 ounces of really good sweet tea. You know, that Smithfield tea, or that Mickey D's tea that's so sweet you can put it on the pancakes. You fill that 8-ounce glass with 4 ounces of that tea, and you set it down. And you look at it, and you may start to ask yourself, now, is that glass half full? Or is that glass half empty? Well, the answer to that question is yes. It's both at the same time. Now, there's not a whole lot in life that can be that, but that particular thing can be. Remember, how you look at something, your perception, your perspective, your point of view determines how you live. Not so far from here, through the years, there have been corn mazes around Halloween. You know, people plant fields of corn and they plant them in certain designs, and you know, if you see it from above, you can read some words or whatever. But many times they're just like a labyrinth. You go in here and you try to get through it and come out. And some of the ones that I've been to and have gone with some church groups and things through the years, they'll have various sundry folks hiding in certain parts of the corn maze. They'll have a chainsaw, but without the chain, of course. Or they'll have some other disguise or something ideas to scare you a little bit at Halloween. Sometimes you get down in the depths of that maze, and it really is hard to get out. But if you have a different perspective, a different perception, if you're standing on the top of one of those ladders that looks like a deer stand, you can see the whole thing. And you can laugh at this joker over here if you can't figure out that if he just took 2 steps to the left, he could get out. Perception, point of view, perspective, reality. What we see and how we see it determines how we live. My friends, that is an age-old condition. It's not brand new in the year 2020. It's been around since people have been around. Today, though, doesn't it seem a little bit different? Now, we haven't been around since people have been around. We've been around, some of us for 20 years, some for 40, 60, 80, whatever. But in a way, this perception, this point of view, this way we look at things seems so much more real today and so much more important than it may have been in the 1950s if you were around then. Today we have a virus that's causing havoc. People are dying from it, and we know the argument as well as I do that are the numbers real or are they not? We can't minimize the fact that some folks have indeed lost their lives because of it. Maybe they had other conditions, maybe they had underlying conditions, who knows? The children contracted or not, the old folks contracted or not. We have folks rioting in the streets and just, murdering randomly and burning down buildings, and I'm still looking to see the good out of that, but we're going to talk about bringing good out of evil in just a second. We have all these things that are going on, and we're looking and think, my soul and body, where are we? We're surprised, we're shocked. The danger is that if it keeps going on so long, we are not going to be shocked anymore. I can remember as a youngster, a young man, sitting down to watch Walter Cronkite on the CBS Evening News at 6:30 every day. And the lead story became how many American troops were killed in Vietnam that day. The first few days, the first few reporting, the first year or two or whatever, it was a shock. By the time we were well into that conflict, it was not a big deal. But it is a big deal if it was you or your family or your son or your daughter or your husband or your wife or your whatever. I can remember sitting there with a little portable television that sat on the table, and Walter Cronkite would come on and say, today in Vietnam, 62 Americans lost their lives, and say, pass me the salt. We become dulled and inoculated or something to these kinds of things that are going on based on our point of view. This text talks a lot about point of view. Excuse me, I'm not contagious. I'll share these words with you there. Psalm 73. I'm going to read beginning in verse 14. This is the plea and the lament and the words of the psalmist. All day long I've been plagued. I've been punished every morning. If I'd said I will speak thus, I would have betrayed your children. When I tried to understand all this, it was oppressive to me until I entered the sanctuary of God. Then I understood their final destiny. Surely you place them on slippery ground, you cast them down to ruin. How suddenly are they destroyed, completely swept away by terrors. As a dream when one awakes, so when you arise, O Lord, you will despise them as fantasies. When my heart was grieved and my spirit embittered, I was senseless and ignorant. I was a brute beast before you. Yet I'm always with you. You hold me by your right hand. You guide me with your counsel, and afterward you will take me into glory. Whom have I in heaven but you? And earth has nothing I desire besides you. My flesh and my heart may fail, but God is the strength of my heart and my portion forever. Those who are far from you will perish. You destroy all who are unfaithful to you. But as for me, it is good to be near God. I have made the sovereign Lord my refuge. I will tell of all your deeds. Let's pray together. Lord, there's a lot in these words. Help us to glean the truths of them, that our point of view may line up with yours. Look at verse 3. I didn't read that, but here's where we're going to start for a second. This is a psalm in which the writer, David, is talking about his relationship with God and his point of view with God, and his point of view compared to God's point of view. And he says in verse 3, I envied the arrogant when I saw the prosperity of the wicked. You ever had that come across in your life? How many times have we said, there's old so-and-so over there, nothing ever happens to him. Got enough money to burn a wet elephant, all the kids are doing great, on and on and on and on and on, but look at me. There have been books written through the years, there have been sermons preached, there have been lives lived, there have been people who ask the question, why do bad things happen to good people? Why do the evil prosper and the good suffer? This isn't a brand new situation, as I said a while ago. It's been going on since people have been going on. In verse 3, he says they're arrogant, but they're prosperous. Look down in verse 6. Pride is their necklace. They clothe themselves with lies. From their callous hearts come iniquity. The evil conceits of their minds know no limits. If you watch the news any day, do you see that? Do you see what's going on in so many places in our country and in the world? The evil things that people can think of to do, and in fact do. The pride that they flaunt. The violence. It just blows our mind. We can't grasp it. It doesn't compute. It doesn't belong in this world, but yet there it is. Goes down to verse 12, and he says, this is what the wicked are like, always carefree, they increase in wealth. The psalmist raises that question. He says, what's wrong with that point of view, God? Why is the world like that? And then he goes on, and here's the kicker. He does what I do, and you do maybe sometimes. He says, but I'm not that way. I'm righteous, and I go to church, and I tithe, and I do this, and I do that, and I take care of people, and I don't kick puppy dogs or pull the wings off butterflies. I'm a great person. Why are the evil prospering and I'm having such a hard time? What is wrong with the way I look at things? Verse 13 and verse 14 says, I've been righteous all my life, but it's in vain. 2 times he uses the word vain. Surely in vain have I kept my heart pure. In vain have I washed my hands in innocence. All day long I've been plagued. I've been punished every morning. Sad point of view, isn't it? Look at me, poor. You ever had a pity party? I've had them. This shouldn't happen to me. I may not be the prettiest thing in the world, but I'm not a bad guy. And look at me, I'm having all this trouble. I've had all these joint replacements and surgeries and all these things. Why did it happen? Why not somebody else? The psalmist says, I'm a good person, and the evil, the wicked are prospering. My point of view doesn't ring true to what I think it should be. And he goes on and he whines and he talks about that and he looks at this from his point of view till finally something grabs him. And he says in verse 17, but I changed. If I'd said, I'm going to fuss about this to you, God, I would have betrayed you and your children. I tried to understand it, but it was too big for me. It was too oppressive for me. I look at the news and I try to understand, why does somebody pull out a .45 and shoot a retired police officer standing in the door of a store in St. Louis? Why do people set fires to buildings? Why do people run over other folks? Why? Why do folks do things like, you may have heard on the news this morning, yesterday there was, or sometime during the night, there was an ambush, a police ambush in California. 2 deputies were shot. And as the ambulances tried to take them to the emergency room, protesters blocked the way of the ambulances and began to chant, we hope they die. When, I can't answer that, you can answer too, it's pure blatant evil. But back to our point of view and our perspective and how to deal with this and how to live with it. When did things change for the psalmist? When I tried to understand it was too oppressive, until he says in verse 17, I entered the sanctuary of the Lord. Now that may or may not mean that he came inside the temple. It could have been a real part of that. What it really means is it changed when I began to pay attention to God, when I began to look for a response, when I was in a crisis and I needed a proper and right and true and eternal perspective and perception and point of view. We need that in all times. It's needed in Bible times. It's especially needed today. Do you remember what 2 days ago was? The 19th anniversary of 9/11. I heard somebody say, if I could turn the clock back, I'd like to go back to 9/12. Because on 9/12, this country was united. There was no black or white, there was no straight or gay, there was no male or female, there was no whatever. We were all, practically all, united in a response. We were together. We felt right. We were doing something proper and divine. I was serving this church at that time. Now I remember that on that next Sunday, and the next Sunday you could not find a seat in this sanctuary. It took about 3 weeks to go back to normal. And you look around today, you could find a seat if you wanted to. So what's our response for the day? That was a crisis. There are crises everywhere. We are in the midst of a global pandemic that is taking the lives of hundreds and thousands of people. This is a period of social unrest. I did not know that I was part of a problem because I happened to have been born white. I guess I need to go back to the black kids I grew up with in Pittsburgh, the ones with whom I worked, and Willie Womble at the car wash, and Bob Skurlock and others, and apologize to them for being born white. Because I apparently had a privilege that they didn't have. I guess I need to go back and apologize to the black folks who were my supervisors when I was a student and worked at the hospital in Chapel Hill. The black folks who told me what to do. The crowd I worked with in the kitchen at the hospital who gave me orders, and I followed them because they were in charge and I was not. guess I need to go apologize to them. I need to I guess I need to suck it up and bear it. I'm part of the reason for the social unrest. There are crises everywhere. There's, as I said, the pandemic, the racial division, the turmoil in the streets, the rioting, the looting, the burning, the murders, the killing, earthquakes, wildfires, floods, political division, rampant immorality. A few Sundays ago, I mentioned a young lady, I guess loosely the word would be entertainer. I'm not going to tell you her name again or how to find the garbage that's on social media that she does, but I would say that someone who would lead our country congratulated her on what a great job she was doing. You may or may not be aware of the tragedy. It is a tragedy. The tragedy going on now on social media about describing the exploitation of young girls. If you ever see that garbage, ask yourself, do you want your child or your grandchild to see that or be a part of it? In all these crises, we need a point of view. And what we are seeing is the wrong point of view. When we pay attention to God, to God's point of view, to God's perception, to God's perspective, that is when we will find a point of view that's right for us. This psalmist's perspective changed when he began to pay attention to God's point of view. He began to see the big picture, the truth, the way things really are, not the way he thinks maybe things are because of his perspective or point of view. That will still work, my friends, for you and me. It is hard because we are finite creatures. We cannot put our feet in God's shoes. We cannot see everything from God's point of view, but we can sure head that way and be led that way. The psalmist says he saw two things when he entered the sanctuary, when he began to pay attention to God. The first thing he saw, verses 18 through 20, is the final destiny. There's a key word there, final. The final destiny of the evil. Surely, you know what that means? Surely, for certain. Yeah, boy, that's a fact. Y'all watch this. Surely, you place him on slippery ground, the evil. You cast him down to ruin. How suddenly are they destroyed, completely swept away by terrorists. As a dream when one awakes, so when you arise, O Lord, you will despise them as fantasies, as dreams, as a vision, if you want. The psalmist, when he looked at things from God's point of view, he saw the final, the ultimate destiny of the wicked, the ones who prosper when they do evil. When we look at them from our point of view and say, how come them and not me? But he saw a second thing. He saw beginning in verse 21, reading through the end of the chapter, how God takes care of us. When my heart was grieved and my spirit is embittered. My heart has been grieved in the past. Sometimes has yours not been, because I didn't get what I wanted. I didn't get hired for the job. I didn't get promoted. From my point of view, I was the best candidate available for the work, but it went to somebody else who was not nearly as qualified, who got the raise that I should have had, and who made the A that I should have made on the test. When my heart was grieved and my spirit embittered, I was senseless and ignorant. I was like a brute beast before you. Yet, I'm always with you. You hold me by my right hand. You guide me with your counsel, and afterward you will take me into glory. Whom have I in heaven but you? And earth has nothing I desire besides you. My flesh and my heart may fail. My flesh and my heart will fail, friends. But God is the strength of my heart and my portion forever. Those who are far from you will perish. You destroy all who are unfaithful to you. But as for me, it's good to be near God. I have made the sovereign Lord my refuge. I will tell of all your deeds. Is that what we just sang? I love to tell the story. The words of that song, and when in scenes of glory, we're going to tell the same old story over and over. What does that say? It is truthful and eternal. So when the psalmist began to pay attention to God and to look for a different perspective and point of view from the one that was destroying him, he saw two things. He saw the final destiny of the wicked, that God would take care of them, and he saw that God would take care of us. Now, folks, I'm not going to blow smoke in your ear and tell you it's a piece of cake. It can be hard. How do you deal with and answer and discuss and talk about that police ambush I was telling you about when one of the deputies is a 24-year-old mother of two. Where is the sense in that? How do we even wrap our minds around the facts of the case? So I am not saying don't pay attention. I'm not saying stick your head in the sand. I'm not saying be ignorant. But I am saying this: pay attention. The scriptures tell us to do that. Be wise, the scriptures say. In Matthew chapter 10, verse 16, Jesus says, be as shrewd as a snake, but as innocent as a dove. Peter writes in 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 8, be alert and be of sober mind. He doesn't mean sober like don't get drunk. He means pay attention. Look at the facts. Analyze them. Be careful. Think about them. See if there be any soundness in them, if they come from heaven or from below. Be alert and of sober mind, because your enemy, the devil, the prince of this world, prowls. What does the word prowl mean? Sneaky. Prowls around like a roaring lion seeking someone to devour. My friends, here is the point of view. Pay attention, but don't obsess. Don't make that the only thing in your life. Look at the big picture. God's got this. We don't know how or what. He's got the virus. He's got the election. He's got the whole world in his hands. Isn't that the little song we used to sing? What's your perspective? I read recently in a devotional a fellow who had devoted his life to serving God, to preaching, to teaching, to witnessing. He was growing old and tired, and he said, Lord, I've grown weary in your work, but not of it. Can you and I say that? The scriptures tell us that God can bring good from evil. The book of 1 Thessalonians, chapter 2, around verse 17. Paul writes to the folks at Thessalonica and says, I wanted to come see you folks so bad I could taste it. And he says, but Satan hindered me. Now, does it bother you and me to think that the devil can hinder the will of God among his people? We need to remember this. Nothing happens without God's direct, active intervention or his passive allowing that to happen. Because good can come from evil. Paul didn't get to go, but he wrote a letter that became the book of 1 Thessalonians that has been a comfort and an inspiration to believers through the years. Think back to Joseph. His 10 brothers, there were 12 of them. They don't count Benjamin. He was the baby. Joseph was the knee baby. The first 10 brothers who were older hated Joseph because their daddy loved him better. He gave him this beautiful coat and all those things. And one day Joseph went out to see his brothers. He'd already told them the dream about how his stalk of grain was taller than theirs and theirs all bowed down. They said, here's our chance. Let's get rid of him. So they said, one of them said, let's kill him. And the oldest brother, I believe, was Reuben. So we can't do that. Let's sell him. And so they sold him to a caravan going by, coming from Gilead, actually. Going to Egypt. Sold him as a slave. They took his coat, killed the wild beast, put blood all over it, showed it to their daddy. So we found this. Evidently, Joseph is now a precious memory. You know the story. Joseph goes down to Egypt. He's thrown in prison. He later is rescued because he can tell what dreams mean, and he's serving Pharaoh. There's prosperity in that land. The rest of the world's in famine. Joseph's daddy and brothers hear about the good grain supply in Egypt, and they go down. And they don't recognize, the brothers don't recognize Joseph, but he knows who they are. And the story goes on down. It's a wonderful story reading Genesis. Finally, when the brothers realize who they're dealing with, they are scared to death that Joseph is going to smack them real good. And Joseph says, no, you meant it for evil, what's happening to me and to you is that sometimes my perspective and point of view is real quick. I want things to be done right now. I want this mess ended right now. I want to go back to sometime, 2000 or something, when this, or to the growing up years when I was washing cars in the back of the Ford place. Ain't gonna happen. The past is past. The future's not promised. All we have is the present. What's our point of view? What's your perspective? If yours isn't right, make it right. How many of us know that old song, He's got the whole world in His hands? I don't expect you to play it. I guess it's in the hymnal. Let you know it by heart. That's the perspective we need, my friends. That God has got the whole world, the virus, the pandemic, the rifle, the election, whatever. Got the whole world in His hands. We're going to sing that as much as we can. He's got the whole world. He's got little bitty baby. He's got.
It's 3:46.
Well,
3:46.
I apologize. Need to sit down sometime and read the hymnal, don't we? Have you found it? If you're not in His hands, make it so.
I'm sorry, I messed up. I had to sing it without me playing it.
He's got everybody here in His hands. He's got everybody here in His hands. He's got everybody here in His hands. He's got the whole world in His hands. Do you know that for a fact in your life? May it be so. If it's not, make it so. And make sure your point of view, your perspective, and your perception lines up with God's. Doesn't mean things won't be tough, difficult, unexplainable, but ultimately, eternally, it's all right. It's good to see you. Glad you come this way today. Invite you anytime you have the opportunity. All hearts and minds clear? Joe Oldham, would you send us on our way, please, sir?